And the Heathcliff casting, I mean, has had some comments around if that should be a person of color and, you know, casting Jacob in it. What do you kind of think about that commentary?
I think the thing is everyone who loves this book has such a personal connection to it. And so you can only ever kind of make the movie that you sort of imagined yourself when you read it, and then you can, I don't know, I think I was sort of focusing on kind of sadomasochistic elements of it. And so, but that's the great thing about this movie, is it could be made every year.
For almost 2 years, the Wuthering Heights adaptation by Emerald Fennell has haunted my life. The casting of Jacob Elordi as Heathcliff, a man of ambiguous but brown origin, as a traditionally attractive, handsome white man, the inaccuracy of the costumes, the debates about how much of the story was going to be like the book, etc., all of it was really exhausting. Before the movie came out, a lot of people started theories about how it would probably be a movie within a movie, or Margot Robbie was going to be playing a modern woman fantasizing about Wuthering Heights, a la like a Lost in Bronte, Lost in Austin kind of thing. None of that was the case. It is simply another whitewashed, simplified version of Wuthering Heights, this time with a focus on the
sadomasochistic elements of it.
We will get back to that. These are my spoiler-free thoughts up top, because the rest of this video will be kind of discourse whinging and more in depth, so I gotta, I'm gonna lead with what y'all want to know about how I feel about the movie. And now I have seen this movie twice, once to take notes as a critic, and another time with 3 of my friends as a Galentine's Day treat. And frankly, I just think the movie is kind of dull. I was astounded by truly how shallow I think this movie is, taking out the fact that it is an adaptation and viewing it as just a film. I just don't think it's a strong narrative. It sort of feels like The Notebook 19th century edition. If you want to watch 2 beautiful white people be star-crossed lovers and have sexual desire for each other, and if you are attracted to Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi, then there is something definitely here for you. And while I do find both of those people attractive, to me, this was not giving anything of interest.
Are they the cutest couple on TV you're watching?
Yeah, if you like white people.
But without the actual class, racial, gothic elements, or for that matter, the rest of the book, the story of Heathcliff and Cathy is about a spoiled young woman who chooses money over love due to the, at least in this adaptation, the machinations of a manipulative maid. And while Fennell once again has an amazing eye and a love of style that allows even the Tim Burton aesthetic to look really good on screen, like Yorkshire looks beautiful, you could also just watch any of the films that clearly inspired this work to get an actual story from this film. The beauty is in service of nothing. And if this is the one beautiful, artistic, non-blockbuster movie you've seen this year, I get being blown away by it. But if you've seen Sinners, Hamnet, The Testament of Anne Lee, Materialist, No Other Choice, you've already seen beautiful movies that use their cinematography in service of a much deeper visual storytelling. Yes, the scenes of excess are fun and surreal, but why are we watching Sofia Coppola's Marie Antoinette B-sides in a movie that takes place in Yorkshire? Like, what is this actually helping us to see about Cathy that hasn't been seen a million times? If there is truly any saving grace in this film, it is in some of the supporting players. Hung Chau as Nelly is amazing, and if anything, Hung Chau's Nelly illustrates all the adaptational failures and missteps of this film. As a standalone role, it is one of the most complex and emotionally riveting characters you'll see on screen because she's just a phenomenal actress. And as an adaptation, it illustrates that Fennell did have the ability to have a complex, vengeful character of color who the audience would feel uncomfortable with in a leading presence. She could do that. She just ultimately chose not to. Because Nelly in this film is Heathcliff, and it is kind of infuriating. I also think, despite having some issues with the way the character was adapted, my Irish queen Alison Oliver was fantastic as Isabella Linton. She is going to be the weird actress of her generation, and I'm so excited to see what she does next. Her and Josh O'Connor, if I was going to be a third for 2 whites, that would be it for me. Like, that's the freak I want to match. And again, being attracted to Jacob Elordi and Margot Robbie is a prerequisite for this movie. And they're both gorgeous, but they don't have any chemistry, in my opinion. They just seem very miscast in a film that is centered around, at least in part, of teen and youthful sexuality. Margot kind of retains her sort of Barbie energy in this movie with a slightly malicious tint that is interesting at times, but you're still supposed to kind of girl boss root for her.
I suppose you shall fall in love with me. I suppose you shall fall in love with you.
Jacob Elordi feels like he's just doing Nate from Euphoria in period drag. I'm very glad I saw Frankenstein first of him recently, because I feel like that movie really gave his range. I feel like him in this is just kind of doing what he's been asked to do before. Be hot, be big, be intimidating. And it's like, I really enjoyed his performances in Saltburn and in Frankenstein because they kind of show more range to him. And I feel like this is kind of more of the sameness. It just really didn't compel me. And so my ultimate spoiler-free thoughts are, I think the film is just meh. I'm not shocked by sex, sexuality, pet play, or even the literal gallows humor the film opens with. I'm frankly too Black to be either entertained or scandalized by people treating a hanging like an afternoon party activity. So, happy Black History Month. And I just can't be moved by the choices Fennell has made because they all seem to be based on her admitted feral teenage girl version of this novel. And as someone who was also once a feral teenage girl, all it makes me feel is that in her mind, brown-skinned people and non-white people are at the margins of stories that she's interested in. But in the end, despite all of my feelings about the movie, it's a movie. She's allowed to have her own artistic vision of it. And throughout all the discourse, I found that the true subject of frustration for me is the "it's not that deep" crowd. I have been really frustrated by the people online who, rather than just like enjoying the movie and engaging with what it is trying to make everyone who does not like the movie a misogynist, someone who doesn't understand a good time. I hate the girlie-popification of anti-intellectualism. It is truly, like, honestly kind of disgusting to me how many people are trying to frame the idea that you can't have fun if you are asking thoughtful, engaging with the art criticisms of this film. Clearly I can have fun. I have a girl dinner Jujutsu Kaisen poster on my wall. I can have fun. Film is an art form. Emerald is an Academy Award winning director. She is someone of note and of merit, and it would be sexist and disingenuous of me to engage with her art with anything less than respectfully thinking that she could do better than this. I don't hate Emerald Fennell. I don't think she's a bad person. I do not know her. I'm only critiquing and engaging with her art. And that is okay. I still think that we would probably get along with most things. Let her and Call the Midwife. But let's not forget, she did write the book for Bad Cinderella. Bad Cinderella. The North remembers. For me, discussing Wuthering Heights is not about attempting to take her down or holding her to an unrealistic standard. It is holding her to a standard and asking questions about the intentionality of what she did. While I'm not a huge fan of the book Wuthering Heights, despite all of this, I have spent many hours and almost a year learning more about it and Emily Bronte. I've also listened to Emerald Fennell's interviews, her defenders, and quite frankly, it is that deep. And my ability to not enjoy this horny mess does not mean I don't have fun. I watched Possession on Valentine's Day. I'm a delight, baby. Before I get into this, I would love to recommend my work wife, Be Kind Rewind, just put out a new video talking about Merle Oberlin and Wuthering Heights. Kayla Says, one of my favorite, like, keeps me abreast of the discourse, has also done a great video about it. And I know my homegirl, Broey, is cooking something up. So a lot of good discourse is happening about this movie. And I think the reason why it is such a rich discourse generator, I think just speaks to how, whether you like it or not, Wuthering Heights has stood the test of time. And while, yes, there could be adaptations of it every single year, no thank you. I can't do this every year. This with Frankenstein was already too much. I just want to say also thank you to everyone who has been supporting me. Those who might not know, I lost Lola earlier this year, and it's been just very surreal not having her around while I'm making videos and doing things. She would always kind of curl up by the microphone or the lights and just kind of be a menace, and I miss her so much. And being able to do this work and everything has been a huge bomb. So just thank you guys so much for being there. I really appreciate it.
There's been a lot of interpretations of Wuthering Heights over the years. There's been so many movies and TV series and stuff made. But I think the point of difference here is this is Emerald making you feel the way the book made her feel when she read it when she was younger.
So a recap for those who do not know the story of Wuthering Heights, because I did not read it in high school. I read this a couple years ago. It does not actually open with anything having to do with Heathcliff or Cathy meeting or even a sexualized hanging, but it does start in 1801 with a new tenant named Mr. Lockwood, who meets his dark-skinned landlord Heathcliff at the manor called Wuthering Heights. Pause. I was explaining to my friend, she's like, how soon does it get mentioned that Heathcliff is dark skinned? And I just feel like, just so you can see, right? This is the first page of the book, right? This is the first page. Chapter 1, right? Favorite page. Second page. Third page, slur. That's it. You don't have to go far. Among the occupants are Cathy Linton, a religious servant named Joseph, and Hareton. I'm just going to call him Hare. I don't know his name. I don't want to know his name. An uneducated young man. And everyone there is miserable. And Lockwood gets snowed in and has to stay there overnight. While trying to sleep, Lockwood finds a diary belonging to Catherine Earnshaw. He has a nightmare about Catherine that wakes up Heathcliff and makes him, let's just say, upset, because he's like, my Cathy's back. Cathy. Lockwood returns to his home, Thrushcross Grange, and recovers with help from his housekeeper, Edgar Nelly Dean, who tells Lockwood about the history of Wuthering Heights and what the fuck he has walked into. So the original owner of Wuthering Heights is Mr. Earnshaw, and he brings home Heathcliff, a boy of unknown origins he found in Liverpool. He has two children, Hindley, 14, and Catherine, 6. Nellie is also a servant who is around the same age as Hindley and is privy to everything that's going on. Mr. Earnshaw favors Heathcliff over his other two children, which leads Hindley to becoming violent towards Heathcliff and beating him and treating him very poorly out of jealousy.
Watch Heathcliff very closely. He's a cuckoo in a nest. It feeds on father's affections until father won't have anything left to give you.
Catherine 1 and Heathcliff end up bonding over Hindley being a dick, and Cathy also sees Heathcliff as an extension of her own wildness. She is very unruly in the wilds. Kate Bushing it up. When Mr. Earnshaw dies, Hindley and his wife Frances return to Wuthering Heights, and they're like, Heathcliff, I hate you. You're a servant and you're also slurs, so you're going to be a servant Cinderella style. But Heathcliff stays to be close to Cathy. Edgar Linton and his sister Isabella make their home in Thrushcross Grange. They are a wealthy, fair-skinned, blonde family. Explicitly that. Catherine gets attacked by their dog while she and Heathcliff are spying on them while they're having a party. The Lintons take in Cathy, but they send Heathcliff away because he's a nasty beggar slur servant. They're like, you have to go. This is for white people only. I exaggerate, but not that much. Edgar and Hindley kind of become disgusting brothers because they both dislike Heathcliff, and he promises that those white bastards will pay for the disrespect one day. Frances, Hindley's wife, dies giving birth to their child, Hareton. I don't know him. A few years later, Catherine eventually agrees to marry Edgar Linton because she knows it is best for her and her social standing. And while she has feelings for both men, more so for Heathcliff, she knows that marrying Heathcliff would degrade her socially.
And if my brother had not brought Heathcliff so low, I shouldn't have thought of it. It would degrade me to marry Heathcliff now.
Heathcliff overhears this part of the conversation and flees in anger, doesn't hear that she loves him, and Kathy is distraught by him leaving, but she does end up marrying Edgar. They have a relatively happy marriage, and then 3 years later, Heathcliff returns, and he got shmoney. And he's like, I'm back. And Catherine's like, I'm already married, so I can't do nothing about that. And Isabella is like, but I could have him, right? And Catherine is like, bitch, I will end you. But Heathcliff is like, I'm gonna make you miserable because you denied me and you know you want me. And so, yeah, we're gonna see what happens now, bitch. So using his mysterious new wealth, don't know how much slavery had to do with that, you know, happy Blood Month. Using his mysterious wealth, Heathcliff seduces and marries Edgar's sister, Isabella. He also takes advantage of Hindley's addiction issues in order to gain control of Wuthering Heights, and eventually he dies. Hindley and Edgar end up at one point going to blows and having a fight, which puts Catherine in distress, and she ends up dying after childbirth, giving birth to Kathy too. Isabella flees Heathcliff's domestic violence and raises his child as a single mother, a sickly boy named Linton. These names are terrible. That's probably why they keep getting cut out of the story. Heathcliff is traumatized by Catherine's death. They do get to do a longing like, I love you, you're my murderer, no, you're my murderer, you hurt me. A lot of whinging.
Your lips are moving and you're complaining about something. That's whinging.
And by losing this one tie to his morality, he decides that, you know, all that time I want to get revenge, I'm going to do it now. And so his big plan is to marry Kathy too, who he technically has custody of, to his son, Linton, so that he will inherit all of the property and all of the power, and he's terrible to all of them, and that's why everyone's miserable at the start of the novel.
So Heathcliff claimed the last surviving Earnshaw. As the father had used him, so he would use the son.
And then Lockwood hears this story, and he's like, okay, I'm gonna get the fuck out of here, because this is gnarly. Fried chicken. He leaves, but comes back 8 months later and things have changed. Nellie is now in charge of the house, and he's like, what the fuck? And she explains that Kathy 2.0 fell in love with Hareton, her first cousin. But you know, Linton is also her first cousin, so it doesn't really matter. They confront Heathcliff about abusing them and stealing their money. And he feels guilty because they both have Catherine's eyes. And he loses the will to live, Padme style. And Linton also dies because he's sick. That sucks. And now Kathy has all the money. She's going to take care of her homosexual man cousin. And now Joseph takes care of Wuthering Heights with Nellie. And then there are rumors of the ghost of Catherine and Heathcliff going across the moors, and I guess love prevails. So it is dense, but not that dense. It's just full of a bunch of gothic, incestuous Andal foolery. That is a little convoluted, which has always been a critique of the book. The book is brilliant. It is not my favorite. I do not like Wuthering Heights, the book, which is also why it's funny to be called a purist. It's I'm not a purist, I just understand themes. And again, I do understand why it ends up focusing on the first half of the book more so than anything else. Most adaptations do that. The problem is that if you just do the first half, it's not good. But let's talk about the changes adaptation wise and what I do think matters versus just me being an asshole.
And we have these quotation marks. How closely should we expect this to follow the book versus being your own vision?
Well, I think the thing is that it's my favorite book in the world.
So I'm not going to go through all the individual changes because I don't think that's necessary, but there are 5 significant changes to the story that I think make it a weaker narrative. This does not include the race changes. That will be its own segment in order of what irritated me from least to greatest. So number 5 is the lack of Yorkshire accents. I don't love that Heathcliff has the only like really noticeable accent, and the servants do, but everyone else has like these very like southern posh accents. And mind you, I'm not British, but I do read a lot of those books, and I do read a lot of class stuff that happens over there, and so I just think it's a little bit. But I did see an article in the Times describe it as posh washing, and I thought that was hilarious. Fennell equates common with a northern accent, so Bronte's complex characters are divided neatly into upper-class folks who speak in RP and lusty peasants who have a Yorkshire accent. I just think it's very telling, especially considering that Emerald Fennell is posh, that she made a choice that is very much posh washing. It's like a soft red flag. I'm not gonna call it, you know, the biggest sin of the film, but I do think it's a little bit. Number 4, the erasure of the second generation. I put this second to last because frankly most adaptations of Wuthering Heights, starting from the 1939 version, which is probably my favorite of the adaptations that are in English, only focus on the first half. And that's because if you go to the second part of the book, you will hate Heathcliff because he becomes a full Byronic character monster.
You shouldn't grudge me one room when you have taken everything from me.
You insolent slut.
And you really need all the themes of love, healing, and breaking the cycles of abuse that come from the relation between Cathy 2 and Hareton. But that's not what people want to see. It's not as interesting as like the all-encompassing like romance between Cathy and Heathcliff. I'd rank it as one of the least annoying of the major changes, but I still think what makes Wuthering Heights more than just a melodrama is that stuff. Because I don't think that every classic is a classic because it's entertaining. It also is, especially when we use it in an academic setting, a teaching tool. Like, it's entertainment, but we have chosen this specific book because of what it tells the story of and because of how it discusses trauma and class and those issues. So I think the unfortunate reality is that like while you can like the relationship between Heathcliff and Cathy on its own without the second half, I just think like we have a lot of star-crossed lover stories that are very popular. Romeo and Juliet is right there. Like the fact that it is a romance that doesn't heal, it's a romance that degrades and creates a cycle of destruction. That's what makes Wuthering Heights an interesting book. Without it, it's just another romantic text. There are plenty of 18th and 19th century literature books that we don't teach that could give us part 1 of this novel. I think part 2 is why it's a classic. Number 3 is why Catherine marries Edgar. This ties into point number 2, but I'm going to do it first.
Edgar's asked me to marry him. What did you tell him? I told him I'd give him my answer tomorrow.
This film frames Edgar and Catherine's marriage as something she does out of financial obligation to save her family. Catherine and Edgar's entire relationship in the 2026 movie is framed as very much her making this very intentional power play in order to save her family from ruin. In the source material, it's more simply that she is a spoiled person who likes nice things, likes Edgar fine, and marrying him would be great for her, and it would allow her to protect Heathcliff from her brother. She chooses Edgar for comfort and stability and to be the most well-off woman in the area, with the benefit of like, and I can also help Heathcliff with all of that. But she is conflicted about marrying him because she does love Heathcliff. But I feel like this movie is so in love with the idea of this relationship that it's like it chooses to make Edgar seem like some dumb cuck when that's not the case. He very much loves Catherine. Catherine does have love for Edgar, contrary to what people will say. He punches Heathcliff in the face. He is not this passive agent in their relationship, and he represents a lot of what Catherine longs for in terms of a benevolent patriarch. And so I think it undermines her choice and her own character flaws by making her have to marry Edgar. The point of the matter is that she was like, yeah, I love Edgar, he's beautiful, he's smart, I'll be happy. And it isn't until Nelly like pushes her to like explain like what's wrong, why do you have this conflict, that she's like, I do love Heathcliff, I am Heathcliff, like me twinning him.
Do you love Mr. Edgar? Of course I do. Why do you love him? I do. It's not sufficient. By no means.
Her first instinct is to just be like, yeah, I already said yes. Like, she already says yes. She doesn't say no. She says yes. All of that kind of leads to the second issue I have, which is combining Mr. Earnshaw and Hindley.
Nothing here belongs to you. Not now. Not ever.
From a film perspective, I do understand smushing characters together. I understand why Emerald would make the decision to get rid of Hindley, because her version of this story isn't concerned with the racial and class implications that come from the text. However, I never feel like Mr. Earnshaw comes across as a man who would adopt a sad orphan boy, especially when he also beats him. You know, Mr. Earnshaw is meant to be a kind, altruistic man, or if you believe the theory that Heathcliff is Mr. Earnshaw's illegitimate child, he's taking responsibility for this kid and loving him and gearing him up.
Is no man allowed to act charitably in this world without even his own son ascribing the basest motives for his actions?
We cannot attend church without fingers pointing and tongues wagging.
Fine. Fine. Then we will no longer go to church.
There is a blurring of class division between him and Catherine, which starts with Mr. Earnshaw, that allows him to have a true bond and allows Catherine access to the wildness that Heathcliff possesses. And Hindley is threatened by this. It is giving I'm the eldest boy. Like, it very much bleeds into the kind of, if you've read any kind of tragic mulatto story of like a kid who is mixed race, doesn't look a certain race, but he's raised in the family and his true children, it's very much that friction. Or if you only watch, you know, Game of Thrones, it's giving Blackfires versus Targaryens proper, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's very much that. And it's that dynamic, that friction between Hindley and Heathcliff, that is so important to Heathcliff's desire for revenge and why he equates power with brutality, and the reason why Catherine's kindness and familial bond becomes his safe space. And without that, I don't really know why Heathcliff stays in this situation where he's getting treated like a pet and is being looked at as a piece of shit. And I think, again, because Wuthering Heights is also blending gothic fiction and the romantic, the incest gothic elements of the dynamic between Cathy, Hindley, and Heathcliff are very important to why everything is so complicated between them all. And I think just without that, you lose a little bit of the texture of the reason why Heathcliff feels he can't be with Cathy. And a big part of that is Hindley telling Heathcliff and making it very explicit that you will never belong here. You're never going to be good enough. And I think that's super important to understanding how this whole narrative comes together. And number one is my biggest gripe with this movie is the change made to Isabella Linton. Trigger warning for domestic violence, so okay, lock in. When Emerald Fennell was saying that she was interested in the sadomasochistic elements of Wuthering Heights, I was like, okay, like, I guess she means like the edging of the yearning and their passion and like the digging of the body, all that kind of stuff. I'm like, all right, that kind of makes sense. No, ma'am. She's just making shit up. And I don't mean that to say that she didn't read the book. She did, because it is rooted in like the concept of something from the text. Because I'm not going to insult Emerald Fennell and say that she didn't read the book. She did, clearly. But as someone who has studied sort of like how people read literature as well, you bring biases into what you read. And so when I heard her explain the root of the sadomasochistic elements in this interview, things were starting to click together for me. So let's play the tape.
Hello, my name is Emily. I'm from the US, and my question is for Emerald. How early did you know what you wanted the film to feel like emotionally, and how did that love guide the writing? And was there a moment in the novel that unlocked the tone of the entire film for you?
I think there's a moment in the novel which is a very kind of disturbing part of the film, which is when Nellie goes back to visit Isabella and Heathcliff. You know, she says she must hate you, and he says, she says so 100 times a day, but Nellie, do you really hate me? And then he says, no brutality disgusts her. I believe that she has an innate admiration of it. And to write that nearly 200 years ago, that is the most transgressive, troubling, explicit thing. And for me, there's always that undertone, that kind of sadomasochistic undertone, and all the beauty that Cathy and Heathcliff have this love that is just sucks and obliterates everything around it, good and bad. And that was the thing for me, I think, when I first read it, where I kind of gasped. I was like, whoa, she's getting at something really difficult. So that, I think that was the moment for me. We're also keen for people to go back to the book because there's so much in the book. There's so many ways of telling a story, and I really do hope and believe that like lots of people will reinterpret it as well, because it's why I put it in inverted commas, because I could never say like I've made there's no way of making the definitive. I could only just make one feral teenage girl's impression of this masterpiece.
So I heard this and I went back to my copy of the book, and that passage exists. It's there, but it's after Heathcliff calls Isabella a slut and implies that she lays there and allows him to do what he wants to her.
As you see, she degenerates into a mere slut. It was a marvelous effort on her part to discover that I did not love her. But at last I think she begins to know me.
He wishes to provoke Edgar to desperation. I'll die first. The single pleasure I can imagine is to die. Or see him dead.
He may be a sadomasochist, but there's no implication that Isabella is getting anything out of it. And even if you say, well, maybe she runs away from him and raises her son in poverty to escape him. Isabella Linton Heathcliff is a victim of domestic violence. He hangs her dog. And this is illustrated in Judith E. Pike's article, My Name Was Isabella Linton, Coverture, Domestic Violence, and Mrs. Heathcliff's Narrative in Wuthering Heights. Chapter 14 presents an interesting dilemma for the reader because Bronte presents two opposing accounts, one by Heathcliff and one by Isabella, of their 2-month marriage. Heathcliff's account is given first in this chapter, portraying Isabella as the deluded romantic with an infantile mind who seeks to win the affections of her husband at any cost. Heathcliff even claims that she stays with him quite willingly, for, quote, if she desired to go, she might. Isabella vehemently contradicts his account by telling Nelly, quote, don't put faith in a single word he speaks. He's a lying fiend. Without a careful scrutiny of Isabella's letter and her transformation, Heathcliff's account that his wife still yearns masochistically for his affection appears far more credible. If we discount Isabella's narrative, Heathcliff's account falsely colors our reading of Isabella. This is certainly the case with Joyce Carol Oates' assessment, where Oates argues that Isabella, quote, has enjoyed and even provoked her husband's experimental sadism. But this reading comes directly from Heathcliff's account. If we factor in Isabella's narrative, however, which we certainly should do, then her disclaimer that Heathcliff is a lying fiend becomes more credible. Isabella further refutes Heathcliff's account by telling Nelly that far from groveling back to Heathcliff, she has tried to run away. I've been told I might leave him before, and I've made the attempt, but I dare not repeat it. Further, the fact that Isabella eventually does dare another escape, more successfully, lends even more credibility to her account. She reveals to Nelly that far from being deluded, she fully grasped Heathcliff's reason for marrying her in order to obtain power over Edgar. To me, this decision is only there to turn Heathcliff into an avatar for wild sex. And honestly, it isn't that wild. I'm a queer woman in my 30s from New York. Pet play is not shocking to me. And for some people, this will be shocking. That is their truth. God bless, inshallah. But it just feels cheap. And I don't understand why, if she was going to lean into the BDSM elements, why not just do that with Catherine and Heathcliff? If they're going to have sex and consummate their bond, why not play with their existing class dynamic using BDSM, since it's already sort of played into that Kathy socially is the dom to Heathcliff? And even their sexuality, when they do have sex in the movie, there's hints of that, but it never goes to those levels. Why turn someone, a character who is clearly a victim of domestic violence, into a willing participant in their own harm, especially at the very end of the movie with very little time to sit and explore any of those dynamics? It feels very much for shock value. And the second time I watched the movie, I was a little uncomfortable to hear people giggling and laughing at Isabella consenting to Heathcliff because it's only sexy because of who is doing it, Jacob Elordi, and the way it's presented. It just feels very ick. And quite frankly, if a male director did that, we would rightfully be up in arms. Someone said a thing of like, why do people want to see Isabella Linton be harmed? Why can't we enjoy that she's a weird girly pop in this? Can I just say, please stop girly popping yourself. Wuthering Heights is a complicated, messy story, right? This is a part of it, is these aspects of it. I don't want to see a woman get domestic abuse because Isabel Linton's not a human being. She's a fictional character, and her being abused is part of, again, the overall narrative about cycles of violence and to further explore how the relationship between Heathcliff and Catherine is toxic. That's the point. That's what the book is about. That's what the book is about. If we're gonna change that, why? I'm not thinking that people are going to see Isabella now in the book as not a victim. In fact, one of the biggest things I found while researching is that overall, a lot of people don't actually pay attention to Isabella. She gets kind of treated as like a dumb character. She really is underserved. And then you get people like Joyce Carol Oates, who only has a good take once every 5 tweets, who thinks that she, again, enjoyed it, even though it's very clear in the book that is not the case. And I think that's what makes it frustrating. I'm not saying that people are stupid and they don't understand the difference and that they will confuse the two characters, but it is asking questions about what is the intent of this story to adapt domestic violence in BDSM and make that part of this dynamic. And I dislike when kink is used only to shock and to blur class boundaries, but then when we have an opportunity to do that explicitly with the two leads that we're here to actually watch fuck, they're like, no, it's gonna be lovingly whatever. Heathcliff will BDSM everybody else, but he's gonna be tender and gentle with Catherine, and I just think that's very, I don't know. I just think that's kind of lazy. Lord, I've already spent like a lot of time on this already. I have a 30-minute video breaking down why Heathcliff would most likely be a racially ambiguous brown person. A brown range. A broad range of brown, from half black to dark skin Romani. I haven't spoken as much about the race bending of Edgar Linton and Nelly. I did not know the context of their changes and wanted to wait till I saw the film to make a call on it, but oh boy, that was a pretty good Mickey, right? Edgar Linton is played in this movie by Shahzad Latif. And rather than being a blue-eyed blonde white man, he is the one with dark features because he's being played by a mixed-race Pakistani man who would have been a great Heathcliff. But because the film does not want to deal with race, I don't want to give the film any credit for what I think could be racially interesting. For example, the skin wall could be really interesting commentary on white beauty. Because he's like, I want the most beautiful color in the world. My wife's beautiful face. Could be interesting. Could have some kind of racialized elements there. But that's clearly me projecting onto it because it doesn't mean anything. It's just vibes. And I'm like, okay, cool. If we just take the film as a film, Edgar is a nice, loving, rich husband who cannot fully satisfy his wife because she's so in love with another man. We get to watch this man of color be mocked, his sexual prowess called into question, and he isn't even allowed to be as angry or as mean as the book version of Edgar, because book Edgar, as I said, again, decks Heathcliff in the face, is much more aggressive towards Heathcliff. It's like, you peasant, get the fuck out of here. Like, definitely much angrier than we able to see this version of him. I think the movie sort of ignores that Kathy chooses Edgar because he is good and handsome and symbolizes civilization. You know, he is the traditionally white, handsome alternative because that's what is being dangled in front of Catherine in the book. Civility or savagery, heaven or hell. And even with his flaws of being classist, Catherine chooses that. She chooses civility. That is her choice. And we don't even get the scene again of Catherine talking about what she loves about Edgar. We just kind of get the drama of her being, you know, not fully in love with him.
Do you love Mr. Edgar? Of course I do. Of course. Who can help it?
Why do you love him, Kathy? Because he's handsome and pleasant to be with. Bad.
And ignore the fact that she does love him. She's happily married to him. Like, they are fine. I don't ship it. It's too Kedang for me. The narrative point of the racial visual dynamics between Edgar and Heathcliff in the book is intentional. Switching them in this adaptation means nothing. But it's also not race neutral because Isabella is no longer his sister. She is instead his ward. Because it would have been weird to see Jacob Elordi treat a woman of color like a dog. It's very awkward to see the movie go around the racial issues, but then clearly have the racial issues be in the background for certain characters, but not all. When it comes to Nelly, I have to give Emerald Fennell some credit because I do think, again, that she's read the book and she's engaged in the criticism because since around the 1950s, probably sooner than that, but I found from the 1950s on, there's been a group of academic readers who have viewed the character of Nelly to be the villain of the novel. And the earliest I could find was James Hatfield's article, The Villain in Wuthering Heights, published December 1958 in 19th Century Fiction. Ellen Dean is the villain of the piece, one of the consummate villains in English literature. And while I think it's interesting that Emerald Fennell herself says in an interview that she did not intend to make Nelly the villain in this narrative, the changes that she makes, especially in terms of Nelly's class, elevate her into this place where she becomes much more involved with the machinations of the story, which is in line with this idea of Nelly being the ultimate villain of Wuthering Heights.
Were you mindful of not making her the villain of the story as opposed to a narrative tool?
Definitely. I mean, I think that's such a... I think Nelly, Nelly is obviously Lockwood's the narrator and nobody's misses him, let's face it. But Nelly is such an interesting character in the book. She is the narrator. She claims, like all good novel narrators, to be a sort of innocent bystander, and yet seems to affect every single thing that happens in the book. And there's that amazing piece of scholarship from the 50s, which is sort of Nellie Dean is the real villain of Wuthering Heights. I don't believe that. I don't believe there are any... I mean, there's villainous behaviour, but the thing that's so brilliant about Bronte, she's radically amoral.
And I will take a caveat of saying that just might be my interpretation and how I've seen audiences respond to the movie, because I see a lot of people who are like, fuck Nelly, we hate Nelly, everything is Nelly's fault, and I'm like, whoa, 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 not too much of my girl. And, I'm just too Marxist to ever be like, it's the servant's fault. No. Which is somewhat foreshadowed when Kathy overhears Isabella blaming the nurse from Romeo and Juliet for the fate of the titular lovers, which I was just like, oh, I see what you're doing. Clever bit of foreshadowing, but I think ultimately kind of a weird reading of both texts, but that's just my taste on that. Hafley brings up that Nelly aligns herself with the Lintons and sees herself better than Heathcliff. To put on my Marxist hat, I think that resenting her connection to Heathcliff by class, since she feels superior to him as a proper Yorkshire woman, because she makes a quip about foreigners when discussing the past events to Mr. Lockwood. We don't in general take to foreigners here, Mr. Lockwood, unless they take to us first. Nelly doesn't have direct power to impact things, but she can use the passive power of being a servant to not share or share certain information as it would benefit her. That all removes a lot of autonomy from the main characters that are driving the action, but I think it adds something interesting to Nelly. What complicates this in this adaptation is that A, Nelly is not white, and B, is made to be the illegitimate daughter of a lord, which gives her an extra chip on her shoulder. They lift Nelly high enough that she is humbled by the downfall of Kathy, rather than fundamentally being uplifted by it in the book. But most importantly, Nelly is a servant who can be dismissed if she displeases the people she works for. It is amusing to treat servants as if they are the true villains, when it is the people with titles, money, and bigotry who set truly all of these actions in motion. And I think if we just take this as a version, what we are watching is Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi manipulate and play around with the feelings and emotions and jobs of brown people. To what end? To what end? Despite all the frustration, I feel, not only about the marketing and the explanation about aspects of this movie. I want to approach it, and I have tried to approach it with nuance, because ultimately there is nothing wrong with having multiple perspectives about a film. I think so much of film criticism online has become a game of right and best take rather than conversation, and even harsh conversation. And I also know I play a role in that, because honestly the way the internet works makes it easy to fall into that. I do get that, but I wanted to do better in talking about this, because I definitely think that there is room to love this movie for what it is, while also acknowledging why people are upset about the changes without making them seem pedantic, because they're not pedantic. And I think that's where I find myself being most divided. It's like, enjoy the hot mess, enjoy it, love it if you want, but do not make those who are acknowledging the racial issues your enemy, because we're not. From the very beginning, my biggest issue with this movie has been centered around one aspect: the casting of Jacob Elordi as Heathcliff. I do not consider myself a book purist. I do not think every adaptation of a book has to be a copy of it. I think we are, however, allowed to ask questions and interrogate why certain choices were made. I think I spotlighted this in my previous video about Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, a movie I really enjoyed. I understand some of the criticism, but that I believe speaks to the larger themes of the novel and has a very clear vision by the director that is tied to and makes changes that are very much in line with the text. And I don't want to spend too much time comparing Guillermo del Toro and Emerald Fennell's movies, but I think their adaptations have a lot in common in terms of how they came together. Guillermo del Toro has spoken about his desire to do the father-son element and his empathy for the monster, which are very much him taking things from the book and from the metatext and pulling it out and putting it into the movie. And Emerald Fennell has spoken about this adaptation being inspired by the feral 14-year-old inside of her, which is, again, very valid and true. Both of these works have Jacob Elordi at the core of the narrative. They both have older than the text co-leads and are both in love with the text that they are adapting without being totally evangelical to the source material. In that way, they are both coming with equal ground. And before I sat down to watch Wuthering Heights, I really want you to understand I wanted to interrogate my biases, because I have had much more grace since the beginning for Guillermo del Toro than Emerald Fennell. I may not have loved her previous works, but I also don't think I'm an uncritical fan of Guillermo del Toro. I have seen others speak about how his disability allegories fall flat. I also understand that as a female director, even as lauded as Emerald is, there will always be expectations for her that are not put onto male directors. Del Toro and Fennell are both marginalized in some ways, privileged in others, and their identities play a role in projects they feel passionately about. And as a reader, writer, and critic, I bring those same complexities into how I view things. And I think ultimately, I do not mind that Emerald Fennell is making a self-indulgent version of Wuthering Heights. I do simply have questions about how she then ignored Heathcliff's racial complexity and just recast Laurence Olivier. I have questions about how she saw the domestic violence that Isabella faced and thought, puppy play. I'm not saying that there are not erotic gothic elements to the story, but having read the book recently, all of the sadomasochistic elements are largely figments of her imagination and her interpretation, or at the very least have nothing to do with the main characters that she wants to write about in the movie that are in this book. But ultimately, what bothers me the most is the way in which people who have enjoyed this movie position those of us who had issues with the casting of Elordi as keyboard warriors and people who don't want to have fun, as if there isn't like a very important conversation to be had. Criticism is an art form, and part of being a critic is being able to situate a piece of art in time both of its own and contemporary. What you bring into it is your emotion, expertise, education, and naturally biases. I'm not a Bronte girly like that. Elizabeth Gaskell has no hold over me. Love North and South though. I am not precious about this novel because it's not my favorite, but I do think it has an importance. When the book came out, many critics were disturbed by it, by the cruelty of the characters, by the shifting of class lines, by the boldness of the emotion. Heathcliff being a visible other is a part of that conversation. It illustrates so much about his experiences, his relationship to other characters, and it's part of a larger trend of white female authors using male others to explore their own political discontent. Part of the power play between Cathy and Heathcliff is that constant parrying of privilege among two people at the bottom. People have tried to make the conversation about Heathcliff's ethnicity rooted in contemporary wokeness, but doing so ignores that we have letters and edits and context within the actual lives of the author and her family to show this isn't the case. We do a massive, massive disservice to female authorship when we assume their minds are as small as the average person. Heathcliff is not supposed to be able to navigate society as an Englishman on sight. That is the seed of his Byronic tree. Yes, in English literature, it was common to depict other non-English people as dark and particularly swarthy. If there is any non-English but still white ethnicity that Heathcliff would have been, it was most likely Irish, because Emily Bronte's father was Irish. He changed his last name. And if she wanted to make that explicit, she had first-hand knowledge of the way the Irish were made to be treated as lazy foreigners, which is not a stereotype that's put onto Heathcliff, mind you. Patrick Bronte was never allowed to forget he was an immigrant, and his children were constantly reminded of it too. It was, after all, an era in which the Irish were always being characterized as childish, lazy, primitive, dirty, and alcoholic. In 1850, the novelist Charles Kingsley disgustingly called them human chimpanzees. In the context of when she was writing it, I can see her pulling a lot of what was going on with the Irish into Heathcliff's identity, whether or not he is Irish or not, because that would be the context she understands, you know, especially because at this time, Ungutra Moore taking place during the writing of this book, it's possible that she did what a lot of writers do. She took what she knew and used her imagination. She had first-hand knowledge of how the Irish were treated, but she would also have knowledge to anti-racist texts. And at this time, Frederick Douglass had gone to Ireland. There is so much literature and knowledge exploring how English colonization of Ireland specifically was considered a warm-up for further British conquest and colonization. The Irish and Negro experiences have historically been parallel to each other in certain ways. Not every way, but in certain ways. Something that people who believe in white nationalism will try to ignore whenever it helps them to include the Celts in their definition of whiteness. There was just a tweet with Elon Musk saying, you know, Anglo-Irish Scots ancestry, and it's just like, dude, shut the fuck up.
Do you intend to apologize to Mr. Morley?
I'm just sorry I didn't get him by the...
And with the rises in xenophobia and nationalism in the UK, would have probably been good to have an explicitly non-white Heathcliff and touch on these subjects. This would actually be a great time to explore all of that. The politics of Wuthering Heights is actually so relevant to today that the fact that she doesn't include it at all is gobsmacking. And all of this is to say that if white Heathcliff is Irish, I would be okay with him being explicitly Irish, them explicitly addressing anti-Irishness in this time period if that's what they're doing. But that's not what's happening. He is just made to be a dark-haired white man. It is erasure at every turn, from the most generous approximation of Irishness to him being a dark-skinned man of color or a light-skinned man of color. Heathcliff's ambiguity is a part of his whole function as a foundling. Everything about him is unknown to the reader, but his existence shakes up the foundation. He is the Wuthering in Wuthering Heights. That ambiguity, however, is not an excuse to lean into what is conventional in a novel that actively fights against convention. There is no excuse. And I no longer accept the idea that there's no range because, quite frankly, Ryan Coogler exists. Ryan Coogler was able to, in Sinners, address so much history, context, race, colonial issues in that freaking film where he could even have a moment where the Irish vampire antagonist could lament about colonization.
Long ago, the man who stole my father's land forced these words upon us.
I'm sorry. Y'all have to stop being lazy when it comes to dealing with these white female directors, when it comes to your defense of them. I find it so strange how fan fiction is being thrown around as an excuse to adapt something with less thematic resonance. Part of the reason why so many like myself wanted to destigmatize the idea of writing fan fiction is because there's a genuine love that comes with that. There are brilliant storytellers. Acknowledging that many classics novels are inspired by other novels wasn't trying to literally collapse everything into fan fiction. Like, not literally, guys. Also, fanfiction is not for profit. This is a movie that cost $80 million to make. If we compare it to like some of the most recent movies made by female directors, Hamnet, $30 to $35 million. The Testament of Anne Lee, an amazing movie, female director, $10 million budget. Little Women, $40 million. Materialists, $20 million. And these are among highly acclaimed movies. And also, we don't teach the fan fiction of every single book. There's a reason why White Sargasso Sea is taught academically, but not Scarlet. For those who don't know, White Sargasso Sea is a 1966 novel by Dominican-British author Jean Rhys. It is a post-colonial reimagining of Bertha Rochester from the novel Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. In Jane Eyre, Mr. Rochester is manipulated into marrying a Creole woman named Bertha from Jamaica who is plagued with madness, but is unable to get a divorce, and being bound to her legally puts her in a private wing of the house, and this is the beginning of the mad woman in the attic trope. Mr. Rochester falls in love with his governess, Jane Eyre, and tries to marry her, but on their wedding day, Bertha's brother shows proof of the marriage and it can't go forward because of bigamy. Jean Rhys's White Sargasso Sea wanted to explore the elements of this fallen slave owner class of people that Bertha would have belonged to and touch on themes of race, ethnicity, colonization, British patriarchy, and Caribbean history. It is considered a literary masterpiece in itself. There's even a song about it by Stevie Nicks. So, we got a Kate Bush and a Stevie Nicks, so we're really all set with the Brontes. Yes, you can oversimplify it as fan fiction because it does what fan fiction does best, tug on plot elements that were interesting in the book and explore it, but Jane Rhys's novel isn't self-indulgent. It tackles difficult themes and is in itself a standalone novel of post-colonial West Indian literature. You do not need to read Jane Eyre to understand this book, but if you do, you get a little bit of added context. In comparison, there is Scarlet by Alexandra Ripley, and it is a sequel to Gone with the Wind, the book, that is, to quote George R.R. Martin,
Then we get abominations to my mind like, Scarlet, the Margaret Gone with the Wind sequel, or these things that where the grandchildren or great-grandchildren just see an opportunity to make a buck.
It was still very popular, it sold well, it's never been out of print, but it is considered an embarrassing continuation of the classic novel. Again, a novel that I don't particularly like, but it is objectively very well written and thematically complex. We do not need to girly-pop ourselves into anti-intellectualism, guys. We don't deserve that. Ultimately, I am not telling anyone what they need to feel about Wuthering Heights. I don't think that is important. What I do think is important is understanding that critics are not here trying to ruin your good time intentionally. We are not simply trying to tear down the work of a woman. We are trying to examine this text that is very relevant to today, even if we like it or not, and explore certain things. It is so exhausting to hear people say, well, it's actually a good thing that he's not a man of color because, look at how problematic it is. And it's just I'm sorry, dude. I can't deal with that. I can't deal with that in 2026 because people love this novel. Wuthering Heights is a supremely popular book. It's one of the most popular books in the Western canon. And it's one of the few that explicitly deals with a main character who is an other and a dark-skinned man explicitly. And yet we are saying that people cannot sit with the complications of having an antagonistic brown character. People are that childish. People are that insecure. I understand it's problematic. And I even saw someone who said that, Emily Bronte should have never written Wuthering Heights because she was being problematic by writing it. Please. I'm gonna hold my plushie of Edelgard from Fire Emblem when I say, y'all have to stop. You cannot be serious. Emily Bronte, and there's a new biography of her coming out in the summer, which I'm very excited to read. Emily Bronte was an agoraphobic, self-isolating person who hated elitists and purposefully didn't want to be around these hoes. Respect her. She was someone who did very much have gaps in her knowledge of other minorities, right? But the intentionality of this book is very clear. She wrote a very radical book for its time, and we can teach it that way. We can explore it that way. All these, it's just like the childish hands that you were treating this woman. Oh my God. And listen, if you loved Wuthering Heights, and I have friends who like Wuthering Heights. I do. Two of my really good friends, two of my bad bitches loved this movie, and they said they loved the mess. And I'm just like, and I love you for that. I love that for you. Watch Testament of Anne Lee, which is also a beautiful movie. But so I'm not saying you can't enjoy this movie. I just feel like we are in this space where we are constantly trying to say that female directors are allowed to just, like white female directors specifically, are allowed to just ignore race and class because they can't do it. You know, this is like, and it was so funny to me when listed among her inspirations for this movie, among them, Emerald Fennell listed The Beguiled by Sofia Coppola. And for those who don't remember, The Beguiled is a book that takes place during the end of the Civil War. And in the book, there is a enslaved character there. Sofia Coppola cuts that character out of her adaptation of it. And her excuse at the time was that she did not believe she had the range to handle that, which many people agree with. Even people who I really enjoy as critics agree with that. I do not. I think that may be a fair critique of herself. We can have collaborations. We can bring in other people. You don't have to do everything by yourself. You do not have to be this supreme auteur who can do everything perfectly by yourself. It's okay to bring in other people. I love Sofia Coppola. I love her movies. I have her giant ass art book. I have the book that she just put out with the notes from her mother. I love Marie Antoinette, even though I think that some of y'all watch that movie and think it's historically accurate, and that really does grind my gears, but that's neither here nor there. But this childishness it just feels so strange to have people act as though like it's okay for white female directors or female directors in general to like not be critiqued by other women who are rooting for them. And for those who are like, why do people only care now? Just because this is a new conversation to you does not mean this is a new conversation in general. Wuthering Heights has been out for 200 years. I promise you this is not the first time people have discussed this issue. You just don't know about it because you're not in these streets. That's okay. Rather than acknowledge any of those things, we are like, the fact that people are combining the fact that like Kathy is a brunette with Heathcliff being a man of color, like, oh, there are two differences that are being made here. Girl, I'm thankful ultimately to Emerald for inspiring me. And honestly, I'm glad that she made this movie because it has exposed so many flaws in the way that we talk about these things. And again, she made her art and we're just critiquing it. But the way in which people are it's never been that serious. It's not that deep. Like, are some people annoying and doing the most? Of course. But why are you just talking to random people? To what end? To what end? Anyway, done talking about this movie. Next week is about The Tragic Mulatto. Hope y'all tune in for that. It's very good.